to other Rebecca.
My name is Deborah.
Hey guys, it's Karen, my review for the last few episodes of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, episodes 13 through 15. And I know I've been slacking a bit, and look, there's been a couple of reasons for that. There's been like a lot I've been watching lately, and I've kind of been slacking a bit. Plus, to be honest with you, you guys know how much I adore this show. I really don't want to believe that it's coming to an end. I haven't really come to that realization yet, but we only have like 2 episodes left, and, you know, I figured I need to catch up sooner than later, or else I'll just never catch up, because there's so many shows that, you know, when they end and I fall back on them, I don't catch up. And this is a show that I adore. I want to see how it ends for sure. And look, if there's any indication that says the show is ending, it's these last 3 episodes. They definitely have a lot going on. There's a lot of storylines that are wrapping up for sure. There's some directions that I was definitely not expecting for sure. But we're just going to get into it right now. So the first episode we're talking about, of course, is episode 13, I Have to Get Out, and this episode I was extremely looking forward to, especially when it comes to that cliffhanger in episode 12. Well, not necessarily a cliffhanger, but us realizing that Paula had to be in the hospital because of this heart attack and things like that, and Rebecca, she's now self-medicating and all that stuff, and this episode was a lot more calmer than I was expecting. This was definitely more of a transitional type episode, but, like I've said before, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend transitional episodes are leagues above most other shows, because there's still a lot going on in this episode, especially when it comes for Rebecca. This is her realizing that now that she is finally getting those antidepressants, her whole borderline personality disorder, it's really not as much of an issue anymore. It's, you know, it's still there, obviously, but she is starting to be able to deal with it. She is starting to be able to, not necessarily move on, but live her life. And most of this episode is her trying to decide, like, what her initial career path is. You know, she's talking to AJ, and he brings up how she is working in this, you know, in Rebetzels, and does she want that to be the rest of her life? And she realizes, no, she does not want that. That's not what she wants. She wants something bigger. This is just supposed to be a temporary thing, and that's very much true. I mean, the whole reason Rebecca joined Rebetzels, remember, is because she saw how happy it was making people, and she thought that it'd be something that she'd want to do. But is it a long-term goal? Of course not. It's not something that she wants to do, you know, moving forward. It's definitely just a temporary thing. And I really like how this episode is her trying to simultaneously figure out what she wants to do, but also try to support Paula, because Paula is just confined in this hospital room. She can't seem to find a way to get out of there. The doctors are telling her that there are all these other patients that are just holding her up, and unfortunately, she needs to take this bar exam, which is going to take like 6 hours long, and she needs to get out of there as soon as possible. And so Rebecca and all of them, they concoct this plan where they're going to try to get her out as soon as they possibly can. Rebecca goes as far as to literally pretend that she's dead, and that whole thing, I mean, that's something that would only work in a show like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and I thought that was just a really fun scenario overall. And there's that great moment, of course, where Rebecca is literally standing with all these, you know, dead bodies and things like that. 3 of the corpses are named Rebecca, and it's her coming to that realization that, you know, life is so short, and she needs to decide what she wants to do. And so earlier, you know, when she found this, like, playbill for this show that she loves so much, they're holding auditions for it. It's sort of like one of those sort of review shows. She realizes that she wants to take the chance. She wants to audition, and this is a very logical direction for Rebecca. I mean, the reason the show is a musical is because musical is a very integral part of Rebecca's life. It's something that she's always imagined. She, back in seasons 1 and 2, when things wouldn't go her way, she imagined them as a musical, just as a coping mechanism in that way. Of course, you know, when the way the show started out, it started out with her and Josh in South Pacific, and so music has really been such a huge part of the show, and it makes sense why Rebecca would want to go there. And I really do love the way this episode ends, where she's going to sign up for this musical, thinking that this is her career path, this is what she wants to do in life, and I really did love seeing that overall. But it was also a great episode for Paula, because finally, after all this time, she's taken this bar exam. She's ready to move forward. She's going to, you know, she's done with law school pretty much. She can finally be that full-time lawyer that she's always wanted to, and I love seeing that. I love seeing Paula move in this very logical direction. It's something that we've heard about since season 2, but seeing her, sit on it for some time, and now she's finally completing it. It's just such a great moment for her, and I really did love seeing that. And of course, the way things do end, of course, we have to talk about the subplot in order to... Now, also going on this episode, we have Josh, Nathaniel, and Greg, and these three, I love seeing them interact, because, in the last few episodes, we've had Nathaniel and Greg interact, we've had some Josh and Nathaniel interact. This is the first time all three of them are interacting, and I love this. I love that Josh and Greg, they sort of have this bitter hatred for each other, and it's understandable. I mean, if you remember back in seasons 1 and 2, Greg considered Josh his best friend. These two were very close, but Josh ended up, betraying him, of course, because of him sleeping with Rebecca and things like that. And this really took a toll on their friendship. And I really love that this episode got deeper into it. And look, I know a lot of people are still trying to get used to Skyler Astin, but trust me, I think these episodes have really shown that he can play this role. And honestly, I've forgotten that it's a recast. Skyler Astin is so good in this role, I've forgotten that he hasn't been Greg all this time. He has a lot of very similar mannerisms, and it's not an issue for me. I know a lot of people have it as an issue, but it's really not for me. I think he's doing an incredible job, and episodes like this very much show it. The moment where these two are just fighting. I love that Nathaniel is a mediator here. Someone like Nathaniel, who a couple episodes ago, he had all these like sociopathic tendencies, and now he's really settled in, and he's been able to find comfort, and he's really turned around, and the fact that now he's the mediator in this is just hilarious to watch. These three, they end up having to be quarantined because there's this boy who is just constantly coughing. They're exposed to this rare disease, and that whole sequence was so great. I love the way that was done, but I like that things did not end bitter for them. They realized that, sure, a lot of things did happen, but they need to put it aside. They need to try to move on as best as they can, and I really do like the way things end there, but things really do kind of end a heartbreaking way for Greg, because Rebecca does decide to end things with him, and it's not because of things being too complicated. It's that she just does not feel she's ready for something like this. She doesn't want to commit to a serious sort of relationship right now, and I really did like seeing that. I liked that scene between her and Greg. I liked how rational things were, and again, it shows the change in Rebecca. Seasons ago, this would have been a turning point for her. This would have absolutely broken her, but the fact that she did the mature thing and just told him that, look, I do care about you, I want to be with you, but things are just too complicated right now, and I don't think we can be in this serious of a relationship, I thought was really great, and it's a really great moment for both of them. It's a sad moment for sure, but I like the way that was done, and I think they definitely did a very good job with that. But the other thing I really love about all three of these episodes, actually, is that they've done a very good job of incorporating the entire ensemble. And this is something that I feel like the show has struggled with for 2 seasons now. And something I've loved about this season is that it doesn't really seem to be as much of an issue. Daryl, Valencia, Heather, they all have stuff to do here. And Daryl's arc, I adored in this episode. Basically, Daryl, he's in the waiting room for Paula and things like that. And he stumbles across this woman named April, who... At first, she's taken aback by the fact that he brought bean dip and things like that, but these two really do seem to hit it off. The only problem is that their daughters do not get along. They have this sort of rivalry that's going on, and at first, they think, okay, we can't be together, our daughters and things like that, and I was a little bit disappointed at first. I was like, you know what, I get that, but I want these two to be together. I want Daryl to settle down with someone that's not White Josh. We've already established the fact that him and White Josh, they're just friends. They don't work as a couple. They work as friends, but they don't work as a couple. And it's cool to see Daryl with a woman for a change. We haven't really seen that before. Obviously, he was married to a woman, but she hasn't really been a big part of the show. So to see someone like April, I really did love this relationship. And I like that at the end, their daughters realize that, they need to put their rivalry aside, and they want these two to be together. And I think that moment where they take that picture and they're basically forced to be in quarantine together, which, was concocted by their daughters to lock them up there so that way they'll get closer, was great. And I loved everything about that subplot. I think it's a really great move for Daryl, and I've said it before, I think Daryl's the most understated character on the show. This season has done a fantastic job with really giving him something great to do. You know, even in episodes where you'd think, oh, Daryl's a character that doesn't really have much more of a story to tell, they're still finding things to do with him, and I love that. I think this is absolutely the path for Daryl to go, for him to settle down with April, and maybe things really work out with her. Maybe these two really do have a future. All I know is that I love what I'm seeing here, and I definitely do want to see more of this relationship for sure. In terms of humor and music, this episode definitely did not disappoint in that field either. I loved the running joke with the coughing boy and how he had like this rare disease. That was fantastic. Stuff like that is so great. And of course, the running gag where Paula's doctor is the brother of course, the doctor that was with Rebecca when she had the UTI. But this doctor, he's so stoic and just so serious, while his brother is just a complete jokester. And the juxtaposition between those two, I love. I could honestly watch an entire episode of just getting into those two brothers and seeing the differences between them. That's how much I loved that gag in the show. Again, this show, when it comes to recurring gags, I mean, they're the masters of it, and this is a very good example of that for sure. But I also really loved the music in this episode. There's a lot of great songs here. Real life fighting is awkward. That one was a lot of fun for sure. That little, you know, fun fight between Greg and Josh and things like that. It was silly. They did a really good job with it. But easily the standout song in this episode, and probably one of the entire show, is Antidepressants Are So Not a Big Deal. This is very easily a La La Land sort of tribute. It's not them making fun of La La Land. A lot of people have thought that. I didn't see it as that. I did not see it as them making fun of La La Land. It's them paying tribute to La La Land. It's them trying to cover something they haven't before, and I think they did that very well here. I loved this entire sequence with Rebecca realizing that she's not alone with the pills and things like that. They even go as far as to get the woman who opened up Another Day of Sun. Yeah, that's the same exact actress, and I think that's incredible. I loved the attention to detail there, the tap dancing, just all of that. Everything about it is just something I adore. That is absolutely my kind of musical number, and it's an all-timer for me. I have watched that so many times since the episode has come out, and I just can't get enough of it. It's one of those musical numbers that when this show ends, that's one of the reasons I'm deeply going to miss this show. The large ensemble pieces, I mean, this show just kills, and this is a perfect example of that for sure, and I love everything about it, but that was definitely one of the best parts of this episode for sure. My only real flaw with this episode, the only thing that kind of holds it back for me, is that one, like I said, it was more of a transitional episode, but again, that wasn't really that big of a deal. There wasn't really a ton for Valencia and Heather to do. They were more there to just comfort Paula and things like that and just be reactionary characters, which is fine, but considering how much they have to do in the next two episodes, I kind of wanted a little bit more from them. It's not really that big of a deal, though, and I will say there's one moment with Nathaniel towards the end that kind of does bother me. You know, he realizes that Greg is single. He gives this look like he's going to be with Rebecca now, and considering we just had an entire episode about him trying to get over Rebecca and realizing that he needs to let those two be together, it was a bit bothersome. But other than that, I enjoy this episode immensely. I think this is a very entertaining episode for sure. It's a great episode that puts Rebecca in a very good direction, and I'm definitely going to give this episode overall a B+. So the next episode is called I'm Finding My Bliss, and oh my god, I loved this episode, and this episode for me was extremely relatable, probably. It was probably the most relatable of the entire series, mainly because it centers around Rebecca. You know, she thinks that she knows what she wants to do. She wants to be in community theater and things like that. This is something that, again, is a logical direction for her, but as soon as she gets there, there's something off. She realizes that this is not going the way that she expects it to. And it's not like it's a bad show or anything. It's just that this music that she's held near and dear to her for years, she eventually realizes is actually not very good, and it actually is very problematic. And I think it was a really great moment for her, showing, again, that growth that she's had. She's not living in denial anymore. She's much more open to things, and I really loved a lot of things about this episode, including just, again, her sort of transition here, where she realizes that this music is not very good. You know, she ends up changing the lyrics and things like that. And there's been so many times where I've been there. You know, this is one of those classic stories where you have something that you hold near and dear to you, and it's a big part of your childhood, and you've watched it so many times, but then you're an adult and you watch it back and you're like, wow, this doesn't hold up at all. This is actually pretty bad. This is kind of offensive. There's been many instances where that's actually happened to me. Maybe not necessarily that it's terrible, but there is something that I once held to a high standard now I think is of lesser quality, and I think it's actually a very relatable episode in that way. And what Rebecca ends up realizing is that she doesn't want to be a Broadway performer. She doesn't want to do that stuff. She's more meant maybe to write shows, and I think that's kind of where this is going to end. I think she's going to end up possibly becoming a director or a Broadway producer or something like that. I don't think that she's meant to be front and center, and I think she's now realizing that. And of course, we've always known, like, her not being able to sing, that's always been a stipulation for sure. But now we realize that not only is she, does she have that inability to sing and things like that, but it's not her preferred profession. I like that we got to see that here a lot, but aside from that, there's still a lot to love about this episode. I mean, this is probably one of Valencia's strongest episodes in a very long time. I mean, we got some great stuff with her in episode 11, for example, but this is like her first huge plot in a while. She's very integral to this episode, and it's mainly because she is expecting Beth to propose. Beth doesn't do that. She actually wants to just move in with her to this condominium and things like that, and Valencia is outraged. She was really expecting this grand gesture from Beth, but we know Beth is not the kind of person that does that. Beth isn't just gonna go out and propose to her, and here's the thing, we haven't even seen that much of Beth, but the show has done such a great job of, giving her a lot to do when we do see her, that we can understand where Beth is coming from. Beth is someone who is a little bit more resolute, and she's a little bit more reserved and things like that. And we definitely do see that we've seen that in many instances, but especially this episode, it really does show that for sure. And I think it was a really great moment for Valencia, where essentially she does get the role of the bride in this show, and she decides to just, tell Beth straight out that, hey, I expect a proposal. I want something to happen. I am not okay with you, just not giving it to me, and I don't want to be together if you're not going to propose. And again, of course, Valencia is being a little bit out of line in that way. I think she's being a little bit unreasonable, but it's still a good moment for her. It's showing what she wants and a possible setback in their relationship, and I definitely did like seeing that overall. But the other good stuff comes with Nathaniel, who I was a little bit worried about at first, but we realized very early on that he just wants to be there for Rebecca. He wants to be a friend to her. He wants to try to get close with her again, and again, I don't necessarily see it as Nathaniel trying to get back together with her. It's more him trying to befriend her and just make sure that he does something good for her. And what he decides to do was actually a really nice moment, where he essentially decides to sing the song for her. She's not confident about it, so he goes up there. They both end up getting fired, but it's a really great moment for Nathaniel. It's probably the most selfless thing he's done for Rebecca, but again, it's not something where it's, something sociopathic, because up to this point, everything he's done for Rebecca has been something really bad. He's always had good intentions, but it's been something really bad. This is the first time he's done something, and it's been genuine, and I really did like seeing that for sure. It shows that these two can have a functional relationship. I don't know if it's love necessarily, but I think these two definitely can at least be friends, and I think Nathaniel is going to end the show in a good place for sure, and we definitely do see that here. And I really do like that moment for them where they do almost kiss. You see Josh, he's getting a little bit jealous, and I definitely do like that moment for sure. But something else I absolutely adored about this episode is that it really kind of went back to Season 1's roots. I mean, most of these characters, at least throughout this episode, were paired with people that, were their first sort of pairing in Season 1. Josh was with Rebecca throughout a lot of this episode. The two of them working on the musical. Them really starting to be in a good place. And that's something I've really liked about the season, is that they really have turned those two around. Josh was a character that back in the back half of season 3, I was like, I don't even know why he's on the show anymore. But this season, they've given him a real purpose, and you see his drive and how he really does care about Rebecca, and I really did like seeing that. Or when it comes to Paula and Daryl, for example, their whole story, I loved in this episode. Him trying to figure out, are they still friends? Are they just colleagues? Like, what are they exactly? And Paula basically telling him that, look, we're going to be friends forever. No matter what happens to us, we're always going to be friends. You are my best, that is his best friend, and I thought it was a really great moment. I love those two together, and I want to see more, definitely. I mean, it's probably one of the last moments we're going to see of those two together on the show, but I love that friendship so much, and I don't think we've seen nearly enough of it, and I wish we could. I mean, maybe it's just because, again, all the pairings on the show are just so great, but I really did love that one. But the one that I loved the most, the one that made me so happy, because I really didn't think we're going to see these two paired together again, Heather and Greg, yes, and I said it before, the one thing that I thought this show wasn't doing that I think was a missed opportunity was giving Greg and Heather more scenes together. And I'm glad to see that finally we had almost an entire episode where those two were together. They were the central focus, and it makes sense. I mean, this was the first person that Greg dated. Those two were together for a long time. Heather knows who Greg is. She was with him when he was at his lowest point. And I really loved what they did with them in this episode, because Greg is reopening Serrano's, and at first he is not happy about this at all. He's very pessimistic about it, as he usually is. But Heather's trying to tell him to look on the bright side and to be more positive about it. And I really love the moment where, Greg, he's so convinced that nobody's going to come to this restaurant. And then very quickly, just the floodgates are open and everyone just starts coming into the restaurant. There's tons of people, and Greg is obviously, he's very flabbergasted at this. He can't believe something like this happened. And I really love the moment where Heather lets him in and tells him, hey, the reason why this happened is not because of the fact that people didn't like this restaurant. It's because your father was just so down on his luck and was so just rude and things like that, and he was so self-involved. He was so self-loathing that he drew people away. And you understand why things turned out that way for Greg. That maybe if Greg had that attitude that, people actually did like West Covina, that West Covina is a good place, maybe things would have turned out better for him. And you can see they are starting to turn out better for him. And I love the moment where he's gone. He sings What I'll Be, which the last time he was in this restaurant as well, he also sings. And again, it's him realizing that West Covina is a good place. It is a place that he does want to stay. And there's that moment where he essentially realizes that he doesn't want to stay for Rebecca or anything like that. He wants to stay for himself. He wants to be in West Covina. He appreciates West Covina more. And again, it's that great transition of Greg going from that pessimistic attitude to a lot more optimistic. And I really do love seeing that. And again, scenes like the What I'll Be sequence, I don't understand how you can watch that scene and tell me that Skyler Astin is not embodying everything that Greg is supposed to be. He is perfectly transitioning out of that just very, just a grunt attitude that he always seems to have. I mean, Greg is always just so spiteful of everything, and you see that he is starting to become a lot more appreciative of things. He's starting to become a lot more positive, and I think it's just a really great step forward for Greg, and I really did love that overall. What I'll Be was basically the only non-diegetic song in this episode. All the other songs were pretty diegetic to the plot, which was different for the show, but I did like seeing that. I loved all of the songs in this episode as well, all of the musical numbers and things like that, especially the ones that are supposed to be really offensive. The look on Paula's face, the look on April's face was just priceless, and I really did love that a lot. However, for me, the funniest joke in this episode involves that guy who had that trumpet. Any time where that trumpet went off and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I really gotta get this trumpet tuned. That's probably like one of the funniest recurring gags this show has done in a while. This show is always a master when it comes to recurring gags, but that one in particular just had me in stitches. There are so many great things about this episode. Like I said, it was a very relatable episode for me. I really do love the moment where Rebecca, she's starting to realize that Nathaniel still cares about her, but she's also realizing that musical is not something that she needs to be doing. There's something else out there for her, and I really did love that overall. I really did love a lot of things about this episode. There really isn't too much that hinders this episode for me. So at the end of the day, I am going to give this episode overall an A-. It's this final episode we're talking about, though. I have to find my frenemy, that I think is probably the one that I want to talk about the most, because there is so much to love about this episode. I mean, right off the bat, just the whole idea of Rebecca having to find Audra Levine, someone that she has pretty much not necessarily pitied, but someone that she herself was afraid of becoming, someone that she has very much detested, is a great idea because of how much those two have grown and changed since the last time they interacted. Sure, we saw them with the episode with her mother, but this is really the first episode where Audra Levine feels like a full-fledged character. She actually feels like there's something more to her than just Rebecca's rival, and that's something I really loved about this episode. I mean, sure, I love seeing all of her and, you know, the girls all go to Vegas. That was definitely a lot of fun to watch, especially since Paula and Valencia and Heather, they're all dealing with their own inner struggles, whether it's Heather having to basically baby Hector because Hector doesn't want to do anything for himself and Heather has to do it for him, or Valencia frustrated by Beth refusing to propose and things like that, or whether it's Paula's legal struggles. You know, she's going to law school and you know, she's going to, you know, she's a lawyer now, and she's trying to fit in. Everyone's kind of dressed the same. She doesn't have those kind of suits because she can't afford it, so we kind of have that going on. Or it's Rebecca and her trying to escape from the reality of, you know, Josh and Nathaniel and Greg all wanting to be with her, which we'll get into that for sure. Don't worry about that, but I want to focus mainly on the Audra Levine stuff because I think that's where this episode really does shine for sure. What works about this episode is that we know what Rebecca has done. We know the choices that she's made. We know how much she regrets them, and we know that at the moment, while she is in a good place, she's not necessarily happy with some of the decisions that she made in the past, and we see that Audra is actually doing very similar stuff. She has basically ran away to Vegas to be with this bad boy type guy who really is honestly kind of a wimp. He really isn't very tough. He very much is just kind of letting it on in that way. And we can see that he very quickly drops the act when he's not around certain people. When he's suddenly around people who are tougher than him, he's just a complete dork pretty much. And, you know, we see that she basically says that she doesn't want to be with her husband or her 3 kids anymore, and Rebecca is trying to convince her to do so. And we eventually realize that Audra has very much, she's kind of idolized Rebecca. She's wanted to become like Rebecca. She has admired the fact that she has found a way to deviate from the path that her mom set for her. And sure, that is a good thing. I mean, we know that Rebecca, she never wanted to be a lawyer. She came to that realization, you know, this season. Audra, on the other hand, does seem like she wants to be a lawyer. She's had a very successful career. She's found someone. She has 3 kids. In many ways, she is basically what Rebecca wants, except she doesn't want to be a lawyer. It's what she, you know, her mom wants for her. It's what she has basically been told that she should be. It's everything that she needs to be successful. However, we see that Audra is not necessarily happy with it. She wishes that she could have some time to just be on her own and just be selfish for a change, because she hasn't really gotten to do that. And I love the moment where Rebecca basically tells her that, look, she understands that she wants that, but she also knows that she has a great life. She has 3 kids there, and we realize that really Audra's just doing it because it got hard. It's not because she doesn't love her husband and kids anymore. It's simply just because it got hard, and I really do love where we end up going with this, especially the moment where Audra actually ends up complimenting Rebecca, telling her that she admires who she is, and there's a lot of nice things she can say about her, and that transitions into the second Jap battle that we get, which that was all kinds of epic. I loved everything about that, and there's so much to love about just that one scene entirely. But again, I really do love how Audra was her own character in this episode. She didn't just feel like the polar opposite of what Rebecca was afraid of becoming. We realize that, sure, she has become successful, but there's always been a part of her that wishes she could be like Rebecca and venture out and do something that was a little bit against the norm of what she has been, expected to do, the certain expectation of her. If she could try to deviate away from that, she would appreciate it. But at the same time, she also does have a wife and kids, a husband and kids, unlike Rebecca, which Rebecca, of course, doesn't have. And I think that was definitely a really great moment. I like seeing those two interact, and that was definitely, I think, the strongest stuff within this episode for sure. And again, it works because we've known who Audra is, and to actually get an entire episode where we finally get to see who she is, I thought was a really great moment overall, and I definitely really did love that here. And to actually get an entire episode seeing who Audra is and why she has treated Rebecca the way she has. I mean, we established these two, they're never going to be friends. Even when they are starting to compliment each other, they start fighting about it. And we end the episode with, Audra telling Rebecca that she needs to moisturize and things like that. So the two of them are never going to be friends, but they understand each other more. They don't necessarily pity each other. They understand where each other is coming from. They have more of an establishment, and that's something that I really did like seeing for sure. And again, it's a very good indicator that we are very quickly going to the end of the series. We're very much in the home stretch, and this is a very good indicator of that for sure. However, the other thing I really love about this episode is, like I said, what it does do for all of the other girls in turn. Not just Rebecca, but Valencia, Heather, and Paula, they all go through pretty big arcs through this Vegas trip as well, especially when it comes to Paula. I mean, like I said, she realized that she did not have enough money to pay for the suit. She goes to her boss, and her boss actually tells her that she's cool with it. She doesn't care how she dresses. She just cares how she is at, handling cases and things like that. And I think that was a fantastic moment for Paula, her having to deal with all this stuff, finally feeling like she can just relax and enjoy what she's doing and not have to worry about just little things like what she's going to dress in. I think it was a great moment, and I really did love that overall. Same with Valencia, her realizing that she didn't really care if Beth proposes or not. She wants their relationship to work out. I think it was a really nice moment. And Heather telling Hector that, he's his own person. He can do it for himself, and she doesn't have to do everything for him. And I really did like seeing that overall. So all of that was great. Then, of course, we have the subplot, which honestly I was a little bit worried about at first, because, of course, we had that episode with Nathaniel where he essentially told Rebecca that, he was trying to get over her. But again, that's when, she and Greg were together. At that point, he did not think that he had an opening in that relationship. He didn't think that there was a chance with that relationship. However, now that Rebecca's open and isn't really interested in having a relationship, the guys are just completely, they are all over her. I mean, the beginning of this episode, Josh confesses to Rebecca that he still loves her. I thought at first it was going to be a dream. That's how out of nowhere it is, but he does confess that he does love her still. He has, basically felt that way ever since they've been together, and him seeing her and Nathaniel, that very much confirmed that. And we have this great sort of subplot where the three of them are basically telling each other to stand down, and in the midst of all this, we have White Josh, and oh my god, I mean, you want to talk about MVP of the episode besides Paula, White Josh, who we have not seen nearly enough of this season. I mean, David Huel is just so great in this role, and the moment where he is, just loving every single ounce of what they're doing here, them fighting and things like that. It was just great to see. I love that he was basically the audience here. The moment where he's like, oh, I left Netflix and the TV on, but this is better than both of them. Just great stuff overall. And them basically trying to vie for her affections, I thought was really fun. But I like that in the end, they decide that they are going to do this in a different way. Essentially, the episode ends and Rebecca is going to have to go on a date with each of them, and she's then going to choose who she wants to be with. And I'm excited to see the way things turn out there. I think that's definitely a very good way to close things for the show overall. The funniest moment, though, for me in this entire episode, besides the stuff with White Josh, had to be in the middle of the Jap battle when Rebecca is talking about how Jap is sort of a derogatory term, and there's a lot of problematic stuff. She looks directly at the camera, and it wasn't necessarily that. That would have been funny on its own, but adding in Audra staring in confusion, not knowing who Rebecca is talking to, and her still talking about, you know, how problematic it is and things like that, and then her just saying yeah at the end just killed me. Stuff like that, it's so subtle and so stupid, but it works so well for this show. This show just has, I love when the show gets so tongue-in-cheek, and that's a very good example of it, and definitely I think the funniest moment of the entire episode for me, again, aside from the stuff that White Josh said. I mean, the show has never necessarily been about who Rebecca ends up with, but it's more what makes her happy. And we know, obviously, that it's not Rebetzels. It is not being a lawyer. It's not her music profession. You know, it's not her being a Broadway performer. So there's got to be something else that makes her happy. And in turn, who does she want to be with that makes her happy? I think that's also a really big part of it. And I'm excited to see where things do go moving forward. I think this is definitely an interesting place to end off of for sure. But I really did adore this episode. The comedy, all that stuff was so great. So many great reprises as well. I like that they're really going all out in terms of reprises for this show. I mean, they're really trying to do as many as possible. The Math of Love quadrangles, I mean, Math of Love triangles is one of my favorite songs in the entire show, so I love that we got to see a reprise of that as well. The Jap battle, I adored as well, and the new song, Slow Motion, was also a lot of fun for sure. But everything about this episode, this just reminds me why I love the show as much as I do, and I'm definitely going to give this episode an A. And with that, guys, that is my review for all 3 episodes of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And again, it's really starting to settle in that the show is coming to an end. It's very hard to process, for sure. But unfortunately, I think we just kind of have to accept it. And, I mean, I really do adore this show, but sadly, it's coming to an end. And I think I just got to accept it and put that aside. But either way, guys, that's it for my review. Let me know what you guys thought of all of these episodes overall. Would love to hear your thoughts on them. I am definitely, without a doubt, going to be reviewing the last 2 episodes of the show for sure. I can't believe there's only 2 episodes left. This season has really flown by, and I'm excited to see how things do end for sure. I have a lot more predictions for the way things will go, but that'll probably just be in the penultimate. I'll probably just talk about that when I review the next episode, but that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
The movers,
The shakers, a happy homemaker.
You'd be surprised how many of them